It started on a Tuesday in mid-February. I'm Elias. For 20 years, I've worked the night shift for the County Road Commission in the Upper Peninsula. My office is the cab of a 20-ton Oshkosh snowplow with a 10-foot front blade and a wing plow on the side. We call her the Iron Maiden. It's a loud, vibrating, diesel-smelling metal box that heats up like a sauna even when it's 30 below outside. That night, the forecast called for a historic event. That's what the weatherman said. A cyclonic system dropping out of Canada, colliding with moisture from the lake. They predicted 3 feet of snow in 24 hours. For most people, that's an apocalypse. For us, up north, it's just overtime. I punched in at the garage at 4 p.m. The sky was already that bruised, heavy purple that means the ceiling is dropping. The air smelled metallic, like ozone and ice. I remember watching the other guys in the break room. Usually, there's banter. Jokes about whose wife is going to be mad they're stuck at the shop for 3 days. But that day, it was quiet. The TV in the corner was playing CNN, but the volume was down. I saw headlines scrolling, something about riots in Chicago, hospital lockdowns in Detroit, a viral hemorrhagic event. We ignored it. We ignored it because when you live where the air hurts your face, problems down south feel like they're happening on Mars. We had a job to do. We had to keep the arteries open. I climbed into the Maiden, fired her up, and felt that familiar shudder in my bones. I checked my hydraulics, checked the salt spreader, and poured a thermos of black coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. I rolled out of the yard at 4:30 p.m., just as the first flakes started to stick. The first 4 hours were hypnotic. That's the only word for it. When you're plowing at night in a storm, your world shrinks. You don't see trees. You don't see houses. You see the cone of your halogen headlights cutting through the white. It's like traveling through hyperspace. Just billions of white streaks rushing at the glass. Thwack thwack go the wipers. Hum goes the heater. It puts you in a trance. I was working County Road 550, a 2-lane stretch of blacktop that winds through dense pine forests towards the lake. It's lonely out there. No street lights. Just the pines leaning in, heavy with snow, like they're watching you. Around 9 p.m., the radio chatter started to get weird. Usually, the radio is just logistics. Unit 4, salt the bridge on 28. Unit 7, you got a drift building up near the gas station. Boring stuff. But then, I heard Miller. Miller was driving Unit 6, way out on the west end near the highway interchange. "Dispatch, Unit 6, Miller said. His voice was tight. Not scared, just confused. "Go ahead, 6, dispatch replied. "Yeah, I got a lot of foot traffic out here." "Say again, 6? Foot traffic? In this weather?" "Yeah. I got people walking on the shoulder. Heading north. A lot of them. Looks like a vehicle abandoned, and they're walking." I frowned, taking a sip of coffee. It was 10 below zero. The wind chill was hitting -30. Nobody walks in that. You walk in that for 10 minutes, your skin freezes. You walk for 20, you lie down and you don't get up. "Unit 6, advise them to seek shelter," dispatch said. "State police are tied up with accidents on the I-75 corridor." "I'm trying," Miller said. "They aren't listening. They're not wearing coats, dispatch." The radio went static for a second. "Repeat, 6. I said they aren't wearing coats. I got a guy here in a t-shirt. He's walking right down the center line. I'm gonna have to stop." That was the first rule of the plow. You don't stop for anything less than a wreck. You keep the momentum. If you stop in a whiteout, you become a boulder in the stream. Someone will hit you. Unit 6, keep rolling if you can, I muttered to myself. But Miller didn't answer. The radio went quiet again, just the hiss of the storm interference. I kept driving. The snow was coming down harder now, huge wet flakes that clumped on the glass. The woods on either side of me were black walls. I didn't know it then, but Miller was already gone. By 10:30 p.m., visibility was 0. I was driving by feel, using the rumble strips on the shoulder to tell me where the road was. If the truck vibrated on the right, I steered left. If I hit smooth pavement, I held steady. I was about 20 miles from the nearest town when I saw it. It wasn't a car. It wasn't a person. It was a shape in the road, barely visible through the swirling white. A dark lump. I slammed on the air brakes. The Maiden groaned, the tires fighting for grip on the fresh powder, sliding sideways before shuddering to a halt about 20 feet from the object. I sat there for a second, heart hammering. Adrenaline is a funny thing. It wakes you up instantly, sharpens your vision. I squinted through the windshield. The headlights were reflecting off the falling snow, creating a wall of glare, but I could make out the shape. It was a deer, a big buck, dead in the center of the lane. I sighed, releasing the breath I'd been holding. Roadkill. It happened. But usually, a deer gets hit and bounces into the ditch. This one was just lying there. And there was no car, no skid marks, no shattered glass from a headlight, just a dead buck in the middle of a blizzard. I grabbed the radio mic. Dispatch, Unit 1. Obstruction on 550 near the Marquette line. Clearing it now. Copy, Unit 1. Watch yourself out there. We lost contact with Unit 6 and 9. Repeater towers might be icing up. Copy, I said. Lost contact. That stuck in my craw. 2 trucks. Radios fail, sure. But 2 at once? I put the truck in neutral, engaged the parking brake, and grabbed the crowbar I kept under the seat. Not for defense, at least not usually. It was for prying frozen chunks of salt out of the spreader. But out here, alone, you hold on to something heavy. It's just instinct. I opened the cab door, and the wind hit me like a physical punch. It screamed, stealing the heat right out of my lungs. I pulled my scarf up, adjusted my goggles, and climbed down the ladder. The snow was already up to my shins. The silence, outside of the wind, was heavy. The woods felt empty. I walked around to the front of the plow blade. The headlights cast long, dancing shadows through the trees. I approached the deer. It was a massive animal, 10 points at least. But as I got closer, I saw the steam. The body was steaming. Fresh kill. I looked at the snow around it. It was trampled, not by tires, but by feet. Bare feet. The prints were messy, erratic, circling the carcass. The snow was stained pink, but not just from the impact. The deer hadn't been hit by a car. It had been torn open. I stood there, the crowbar heavy in my gloved hand, staring at the rib cage of this animal. It had been cracked open like a walnut. The organs were gone. The meat was stripped from the flank. A wolf. A bear. In February, bears are hibernating. And wolves. Wolves don't leave footprints that look like human feet. A sound cut through the wind. A wet, rattling gasp. I spun around, raising the bar. At the edge of the tree-line, where the plow headlights faded into the dark, something was standing. It looked like a man. He was wearing jeans, stiff with frost, and nothing else. No shirt. No shoes. His skin was pale, almost blue, but his chest was heaving. He wasn't shivering. That was the first thing I noticed. He wasn't shivering. He was vibrating, like a machine with a loose gear. His muscles were locked in a constant, high-frequency spasm. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice swallowed by the wind. "Buddy, get in the truck. You're gonna freeze." He didn't answer. He tilted his head. The movement was jerky, like a bird. He locked eyes with me. Even from 20 feet away, I could see his eyes. They weren't glazed over. They were wide, dilated, and bloodshot to the point of being entirely red. He took a step toward me. Then another. He moved fast. Too fast for the cold. "Stop!" I shouted, backing up toward the truck ladder. I said stop. He opened his mouth, and a sound came out that I will never forget. It wasn't a scream. It was a chattering, like teeth slamming together 100 times a second. Clack, 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 clack. Then he dropped to all fours and sprinted. I didn't think. I moved. I scrambled up the steel ladder of the Maiden, my boots slipping on the ice-covered rungs. I heard the crunch of snow behind me, close. Too close. I threw myself into the cab and slammed the door. I didn't have time to lock it. I just leaned my shoulder against it and grabbed the handle. Thud. A body hit the door. The whole truck rocked. This wasn't a small impact. It felt like I'd been hit by another vehicle. A face pressed against the window glass right next to my ear. It was the man from the woods. But up close, he looked wrong. His skin was pulled tight over his skull. His lips were chewed away, leaving a raw, red grin, and the heat radiating off him. I could feel it through the glass. He was burning up. He was melting the snow on the window where his skin touched it. He didn't punch the glass. He scratched it. Fast, frantic scratching, like a dog trying to dig through a floor. His fingernails were gone, just bloody stumps, but he kept digging. Clack, 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 clack. That sound. The teeth. "Get off!" I screamed, fumbling for the gear shift. I kicked the parking brake release. I stomped on the gas. The Maiden roared, 12 cylinders of diesel power waking up. The torque twisted the frame. The man held on. He had hooked his fingers, his bloody stumps, into the mirror bracket. He was pulling himself up, trying to find a gap in the seal of the door. I cranked the steering wheel hard to the left, aiming for the deep snow on the shoulder. I wanted to shake him off. The plow blade caught a hidden drift and the truck bucked. The man lost his grip. He fell backward, vanishing into the white swirl under the massive rear tires. I felt a bump, a sickening, wet thud that vibrated up through the seat. I didn't stop. I hammered the throttle, keeping the transmission in low gear, pushing snow, pushing air, just trying to put distance between me and that thing. I drove for 5 miles without blinking. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see him running behind me, pacing the truck. But there was only the white wall of the storm. I grabbed the radio mic again. My voice cracked. "Dispatch. Dispatch. This is Unit 1. I have a situation on 550. I was attacked. I need police now. Static." Then, a voice. But it wasn't the dispatcher, Sharon. It was a man. He sounded breathless. "Stay off the roads. If you can hear this, stay off the roads. They are attracted to the heat. Kill your engines. Repeat. Kill your engines. Who is this? I yelled. Dispatch. Unit 1. The voice came back, recognizable now. It was Miller. Unit 6. The one who had gone silent. Miller? Miller, where are you? Elias. Miller sounded like he was crying. Or laughing. I couldn't tell. Elias, I'm in the trees. I wrecked the truck. I had to. They were all over it. They like the engine, Elias. They like the warmth. Miller, what are you talking about? The fever, Miller whispered. It cooks them. They're freezing to death and burning alive at the same time. They need heat. They need fuel. Don't let them hear your engine. Don't let them feel the heat. Miller, hold on. I'm coming to get you. What's your 20? No! Miller screamed. It was a raw, shredding sound. Don't come here. There's hundreds of them. They came off the bus from Detroit. The bus crashed. They're all loose. They're cold, Elias. They're so cold, and they're eating the heat. Then I heard it over the radio, in the background of Miller's transmission. Clack, 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 clack. Dozens of them. Miller. Turn it off, Elias, Miller whispered. Turn off the truck. Let the cold in. It's the only way they won't find you. Then the transmission cut with a sharp electronic squeal. I sat there in the middle of County Road 550. The engine of the Iron Maiden hummed beneath me. The heater was blowing hot air onto my feet. The dashboard lights cast a warm, amber glow over the cab. They like the heat. I looked at the temperature gauge. The engine was running at 190 degrees. In a frozen world, I was driving a beacon. I was driving a bonfire. I looked out the windshield. The snow was falling harder, burying the world. And then I saw them. Far ahead, at the limit of my high beams, shadows were detaching themselves from the tree line. 1, 2, 5, 10. They moved with that same jerky, bird-like twitch. They weren't walking down the road. They were turning their heads toward me, toward the rumble of the diesel, toward the heat. I realized then that the plow, the thing that was supposed to keep me safe, the armor, was actually the bait. I had a choice. I could try to plow through them. But Miller said there were hundreds. If I got stuck, if I slid into a ditch, they would swarm the cab. They would pry the doors open to get to the warmth inside. And I was the warmth. Or I could do what Miller said. I looked at the oncoming horde. They were sprinting now, a wave of pale limbs and red eyes cutting through the snow. I reached for the key. My hand hovered over the ignition. To turn off the engine meant losing the heater. It meant the temperature in the cab would drop to match the outside within an hour. It meant freezing, but keeping it on meant being torn apart. I watched the first one enter the light. It was a woman in a torn business suit. She was screaming, but no sound came out, just that chattering. I turned the key. The roar of the diesel engine died. The vibration stopped. The lights on the dashboard flickered and went black. The headlights died, plunging the world into absolute, suffocating darkness. I sat in the silence. The only sound was the wind howling against the glass and the ticking of the cooling metal engine block. I held my breath. I heard the crunch of snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They were close. They were right outside the door. I squeezed my eyes shut. I gripped the crowbar across my chest. Thump. Something bumped the tire. Then a hand brushed against the metal step. I could hear them sniffing. Sharp, wet sniffs. Sniffing for the exhaust. Sniffing for the residual heat of the radiator. One of them scrambled up onto the hood. I could hear its bare feet slapping against the metal. It was searching. It was right above me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The cold began to creep in through the floorboards, grabbing at my ankles. That was the first night. The night the world went cold. And I realized that to survive, I had to become just as cold as the things hunting me. I learned something about physics that night. You can read about thermodynamics in a book, but you don't understand it until you're sitting in a metal box, watching your life seep out through the steel. An engine block on an Oshkosh plow is a massive piece of iron. When it's running, it's 190 degrees. When you shut it off, it holds that heat. It radiates it. For the first 20 minutes, the hood of the Iron Maiden was the warmest thing in the county. And they knew it. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands clamped under my armpits, watching them through the bottom corner of the windshield. I had scraped a tiny peephole in the frost on the inside of the glass. They were swarming the hood. There were 3 of them right on top of the engine cowling. They were piled together like a knot of snakes, pressing their bare chests, their faces, their groins against the yellow metal. They were soaking it up. I could hear them. That was the worst part. Without the engine, there was nothing to drown out the sounds they made. It wasn't just the teeth chattering, that clack-clack-clack sound that sounded like someone shaking a bag of dice. It was the pleasure. They were making these low, wet moans, like a dog scratching an itch it couldn't reach. They were feeding on the residual thermal energy. I watched the temperature gauge on the dash. The needle was dropping. 150 degrees. 120 degrees. As the metal cooled, their behavior changed. They got agitated. The one on the center of the hood, a man who looked like he'd been a mechanic once, judging by the grease stains on what was left of his skin, started slamming his head against the grill. Bang, bang, bang. He was frustrated. The food was running out. Inside the cab, the cold was arriving. It didn't sneak in. It fell on me like a blanket. The Iron Maiden wasn't insulated for this. It was a work truck. It was built to run hot. Without the heater, it was just a windbreak. My breath started pluming in front of my face. Thick, white clouds. I tried to breathe shallowly. I was terrified that they could see the heat of my breath through the glass. Could they sense that tiny difference? Could they feel the 98.6 degrees burning inside my chest? I slowly reached for the blanket I kept behind the seat. It was a scratchy, oil-stained wool thing. I moved inch by inch. The fabric rustled. Stop. On the hood, the mechanic froze. His head snapped up. He looked straight at the windshield. I went rigid. My muscles locked up so hard they cramped. He crawled forward on his hands and knees, sliding on the slick metal. He pressed his face against the glass, right where I was sitting. I was face to face with him, separated by a quarter-inch of safety glass. His eyes were terrifying. The pupils were blown wide, black holes swallowing the red scara. But his skin was graying. The blue flush I'd seen earlier was gone. He was turning the color of ash. He opened his mouth and exhaled against the window. No steam. That's when I realized they don't generate heat. They burn it, they steal it, but they don't keep it. They are cold-blooded in the most literal sense. He licked the glass. He was tasting the temperature difference. The heat from my body was warming the air inside the cab, and that air was warming the glass just a fraction of a degree more than the outside air. He raised a fist. It was frozen hard, the knuckles split to the bone. He drew it back to strike. I gripped the crowbar. I braced my feet. But the blow never came. His arm shuddered. The chattering of his teeth slowed down. Clack, clack, clack. He slumped. Just like that. His forehead rested against the glass. His eyes rolled back, and he slid sideways off the hood. He didn't fall to the ground. He just curled up in the gap between the fender and the hood, pulling his knees to his chest. The others were doing the same. As the truck died, as the heat vanished, they were shutting down. The storm was reclaiming them. I didn't sleep. You can't sleep when your body core temperature is dropping. Your brain won't let you. It keeps jolting you awake with adrenaline spikes, telling you that if you close your eyes, you won't open them again. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. 3 a.m. 4 a.m. The inside of the windshield was fully iced over now. I was encased in a glacier. My feet were numb blocks of wood. I couldn't feel my toes. I knew I had frostnip, maybe frostbite starting. I kept wiggling them, flexing my calves, doing isometric squeezes in my thighs to generate blood flow. Don't shiver. Shivering makes noise. But I couldn't help it. The shivers were violent. My teeth were chattering now, just like theirs. I bit down on my gloved leather thumb to muffle the sound. I spent those hours thinking about my choices. Choice A. Turn the key. If I turned the key, the Maiden might start. She had a block heater, but it wasn't plugged in. At 20 below, diesel turns to gel. The battery cold cranking amps dropped by half. If she cranked and didn't start, the noise of the starter motor would wake them up. If she did start, the heat would wake them up. They would be on me before I could get the transmission in gear. Choice B. Stay here. If I stayed here another 6 hours, I would die of hypothermia. Simple math. Choice C. Leave. This was the insane choice. Leave the armored box. Step out into the blizzard. I tried to remember the map. I was on County Road 550, near the hairpin turn by Sugarloaf Mountain. There was a structure nearby, an old Department of Natural Resources way station, a small shack, mostly used during deer season to check tags. It was maybe half a mile up the road, a half mile in deep snow. I waited for the grey light of dawn. It came slowly, a reluctant lightening of the gloom. The storm hadn't stopped, but the wind had died down to a moan. I used the sleeve of my jacket to rub a circle in the frost on the side window. I looked down. The road was gone. It was just a field of white undulations. But directly around the truck, the snow was lumpy. Mounds. Dozens of them. They looked like termite mounds made of ice. The infected had burrowed. They had dug into the drifts, curled into balls, and let the snow cover them. The snow acted as an insulator, keeping them just warm enough to keep their cells from bursting, but cold enough to induce torpor. They were a minefield. If I opened the door, the dome light would come on. I reached up and smashed the plastic cover with the butt of the crowbar, twisting the bulb out. Silence. I looked at the handle. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely grip it. "Okay, Elias," I whispered. My voice sounded like gravel. "Move or die." I grabbed my thermos. It was stone cold. I clipped my radio to my belt. I took the crowbar. I unlatched the door. Click. I froze. Nothing happened. The mounds stayed still. I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, a high, rusty squeal that cut through the morning air like a gunshot. I winced, pulling the door shut immediately, leaving just a crack. I watched the mounds. One of them, near the rear tire, shifted. A crack appeared in the snow crust. A hand, grey and withered, poked out, fingers twitching in the air like an antenna testing for signal. It waited. I waited. The wind gusted, covering the sound. The hand slowly withdrew into the snow. They were dormant, but they were on a hair trigger. Sound would wake them. Vibration would wake them. Heat would wake them. I had to walk through them without making a sound. I slipped out of the cab. I didn't use the ladder. I lowered myself from the running board, stepping as softly as I could into the drift. The snow was waist-deep. This was a problem. Moving through waist-deep snow is loud. It's a series of crunches and drags. Whump, drag, whump. I stood by the front tire of the Maiden, shivering violently. The cold out here was a physical weight. It felt like walking underwater. I looked at the road ahead. The way station. I couldn't see it through the blowing snow, but I knew it was there. North. Keep the tree line on my left. I took a step. The snow compressed under my boot. Crunch. It sounded like a firecracker to my ears. To my right, about 10 feet away, a mound of snow exploded. It wasn't a slow wake-up. It was instantaneous. The snow flew upward, and a figure launched itself out of the drift. It was a teenager, maybe 16, wearing gym shorts and one sock. He didn't scream. He didn't look around. He launched himself at the sound. He was blind with the cold, running on pure auditory reflex. He landed where I had been a second ago, his hands clawing at the tire of the truck. He began biting the rubber, thinking it was the source of the noise. I froze. I was a statue. He stopped biting. He lifted his head, sniffing. The snot on his face had frozen into icicles. He turned his head slowly, scanning the horizon. His eyes passed right over me, because I was cold. My outer layers were the same temperature as the air. I had no heat halo. To him, I was just a tree stump. I was just part of the landscape. He twitched, shivering so hard his bones rattled audibly. Then, without finding a source of heat, he collapsed back into the hole he'd emerged from and began frantically pulling snow over himself. He was burying himself again. I understood then. They had limited energy. They couldn't stay active in this cold without a target. Every second they were exposed, they were dying. If they didn't find food or heat immediately, they had to go back to sleep. I waited until the snow over him settled. I took another step. This time, I timed it with the wind. When the wind gusted, I moved. Step. Wait. Step. Wait. It took me an hour to move 200 yards. My legs were burning, not from exertion, but from the lactic acid buildup of moving so slowly in the freezing powder. My vision was tunneling. I was starting to see spots. Black spots dancing in the white. Hypothermia stage 2, my brain supplied. Confusion. Lethargy. Paradoxical undressing. I had the urge to take off my jacket. I felt suddenly, overwhelmingly hot. I knew it was a lie. I knew it was my brain misfiring as the blood retreated from my extremities to save my organs. I bit my tongue until I tasted copper to keep focused. Keep the jacket on, Elias. Keep it on. Then, a shape materialized in the grey mist. The way station. It was a small, cinder-block building with a flat roof and a single metal door. It looked like a palace. I picked up the pace. I couldn't help it. The promise of shelter made me careless. I stumbled over a hidden log under the snow and fell forward, landing hard on my chest. Thud. The vibration traveled through the ground. Instantly, the snow around me began to boil. 3 mounds erupted within 20 feet of me. 1 behind. 2 to my left. They screamed this time. A high, thin shriek that sounded like escaping steam. They had a target. They had a vibration. I scrambled up, abandoning stealth. Run, I rasped. I couldn't run. The snow was too deep. I plowed forward, lifting my knees high, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The one behind me was fast. I could hear the slap-slap-slap of bare feet on the packed snow crust. I swung the crowbar backward blindly. It connected. A solid thwack of steel hitting frozen bone. The pursuer went down, snarling. I reached the way station. The door was steel. It had no handle, just a latch. Locked. No, 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 I whimpered. I slammed my shoulder into it. It didn't budge. I turned around. The 2 others were closing in. One was a large man, naked, his skin purple and black with frostbite. He was missing an ear. He wasn't running. He was leaping, bounding through the snow like a wolf. I raised the crowbar. My hands were so numb I couldn't feel the metal. I was just holding it by friction. He lunged. I swung. The bar hit him in the shoulder, shattering the collarbone, but he didn't stop. The momentum carried him into me. We hit the wall of the way station together. The heat. Oh God, the heat. Even freezing to death, his body was scalding. It felt like being tackled by a radiator. He was burning his remaining calories in one final burst of violence. His teeth snapped inches from my throat. Clack, clack, clack. Spittle froze on my cheek. I jammed the hooked end of the crowbar under his jaw, pushing his head back. He was strong. Insanely strong. The virus, the fever, whatever it was, it turned off the limiters in the muscles. He was tearing his own tendons to get to me. I could feel his heat seeping into my jacket. He was trying to burrow into me. He wanted my warmth. Get off. I grunted. I planted my boot against his hip and shoved. At the same time, I twisted the bar. His neck popped, a dry, snapping sound. He went limp. Dead weight. I shoved him off. He fell into the snow, steaming. The 3rd one was 10 feet away. It stopped. It looked at the dead one. It looked at the steam rising from the body. It dove for the corpse. It didn't want me. It wanted the heat. It started tearing at the dead man, huddled over him, pressing itself into the fresh kill's warmth. I spun back to the door. The lock. I jammed the flat end of the crowbar into the gap between the door and the frame. I leaned into it with everything I had left. Screech. The metal bent. The latch popped. I fell inside, kicking the door shut behind me. I slammed the deadbolt home. Then I collapsed. I was on a linoleum floor. The air inside was stale, smelling of old coffee and dust. But it was dead silent, and it was out of the wind. I rolled onto my back, gasping, staring at the ceiling tiles. I checked my hands. My gloves were shredded. My fingers were white, waxy. I was safe. For the moment. I lay there for a long time, just listening to the wind buffet the walls. Then I heard it. from the corner of the room. In the shadows behind the old metal desk, a soft, rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. Not a heartbeat. A tail. A foot tapping. I sat up, grabbing the crowbar again. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. Sitting in the corner, wrapped in a bright orange hunting blanket, was a figure. It was small. A child. "Hello," I croaked. The figure turned. The blanket slipped. It was a girl, maybe 10 years old. She was wearing a parka that was too big for her. She looked at me with huge, terrified eyes. She wasn't one of them. She was shivering, human shivering, but she was holding a finger to her lips. "Sure." She pointed down. I looked at the floor. In the center of the room, there was a metal grate, a heating vent, and coming from the vent, drifting up from the basement furnace room below, was a sound. Clack, clack, clack. There was something in the basement. And the furnace. The furnace was running. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the floor vent. It was a standard industrial register, about a foot wide, painted a chipping beige. Warm air was chugging out of it, smelling of dust and heating oil. But underneath the whoosh of the air, I could hear them. It sounded like rats in a wall, multiplied by 1,000. Scrabbling. Nails on concrete. Bodies bumping against piping. And that constant, low-frequency chattering. Clack, clack, clack. I looked at the girl. She was curled tight against the file cabinet, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked like a bundle of rags, except for her eyes. They were locked on the vent. I crawled over to her. I kept my movements slow, sliding across the linoleum so my boots wouldn't squeak. "Hey," I whispered. My voice was a wreck. "I'm Elias." She didn't blink. She just whispered back, "Don't walk on the warm spots." I frowned. "What?" "The floor," she breathed. "Don't stand where the pipes are. They can hear the footsteps better on the warm spots." I looked at the floor. It was tiled, standard government issue. But she was right. I reached out and touched a tile near the center of the room. It was warm. The heating ducts ran right under the slab. "How many are down there?" I asked. She held up 2 hands. 10 fingers. Then she did it again. And again. 30. I asked. She shook her head. "More." They came from the highway. The bus. The bus crashed into the ditch out back. They broke into the basement door. They like the boiler. I felt a sick feeling in my stomach. The boiler. An old fuel oil beast, probably from the 70s. A cast-iron heart pumping heat into the building. To them, it must feel like a sun. "Is there a door?" I asked. "Between the basement and here?" She pointed to the back of the room, past the small kitchenette. A solid wood door. There was a chair jammed under the doorknob. I crawled over to check it. The wood was splintered near the bottom. Something had tried to chew through it. I put my ear against the panel. The heat radiating through the wood was intense. And the sound. It was chaos. I could hear them fighting. Snarling, wet slaps of flesh on flesh. They were fighting for position, trying to get closer to the burner. The ones on the outside of the pile were shoving the ones on the inside. It was a mosh pit of freezing bodies trying to incinerate themselves. I crawled back to the girl. "We can't stay here. We can't leave," she said, her voice trembling. "The ones outside. They're waiting." She was right. I had just fought through them. The way station was surrounded. We were trapped in a box. Below us, a hive. Outside, a siege. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah," she said. "Okay, Sarah. We have a problem. The furnace is running. As long as it's running, they're happy down there. They're distracted. But what happens when it stops?" She looked at me, terror widening her eyes. "It cycles," she whispered. "It turns off when the room gets hot. Then they get loud." I looked at the thermostat on the wall. It was an old round Honeywell dial. It was set to 68 degrees. The needle was currently at 67. The room was warming up. My body heat, the girl's body heat, the furnace blasting. We were pushing the temperature up. When that needle hit 68, the burner would cut. The blower would die. The basement would go silent. And 30 monsters would suddenly realize the heat source was gone. "Where does the fuel come from?" I asked. "Outside tank," she said. "Big tank behind the building." I nodded. "Standard setup. Gravity feed or a pump?" I looked at the thermostat again. The needle crept closer to the hash mark. "We need to keep it running," I said. "If it stops, they come looking for the pilot light. Or they come looking for us." I stood up, carefully avoiding the warm tiles, and walked to the thermostat. I reached out to crank it up, to set it to 80. Keep the fire burning. But my hand stopped. If I turned it up, I was just feeding them. I was keeping them strong. And eventually, the fuel would run out. When the fuel ran out, the boiler would go cold forever. And then they would come up that stairs, hungry for the only heat sources left. We were just delaying the inevitable. Click. The thermostat triggered. The sound of the air blowing through the vents died instantly. The low hum of the burning oil in the basement cut out. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, from the vent in the floor, a sound drifted up. A collective inhale. It sounded like a massive lung inflating. Tss. They sensed the temperature drop immediately. The cast iron boiler holds heat, but without the fire, it starts to fade. Then came the movement. It wasn't the frantic fighting from before. It was purposeful. I heard footsteps below. Dozens of them. They were spreading out. They were moving away from the boiler, scanning the room. Thump, thump, thump. Something hit the ceiling of the basement, the floor right beneath my feet. "They're looking for the pipes," Sarah whispered. Tears were streaming down her face. "They follow the pipes up." I looked at the vent again. It was screwed into the floor, but the screws were rusted. If they pushed up... "Get away from the vent," I hissed. I grabbed Sarah and pulled her toward the corner, behind the heavy metal desk. Then the basement door, the one with the chair jammed under the knob, shuddered. Boom! Someone had thrown themselves against it from the other side. The chair groaned. The legs scraped an inch across the linoleum. Boom! "They know we're here," I said. "They can hear us breathing." I looked around the room. I needed a weapon. The crowbar was in my hand, but a crowbar is no good against 30 of them. I needed something else. My eyes landed on the kitchenette. Under the sink. Cleaning supplies. I scrambled over, opening the cabinet. Bleach. Windex. And a red plastic jug. Drain opener. Sulfuric acid. It wasn't a flamethrower, but it was chemistry. Boom! The door buckled. The wood around the frame splintered. The chair was slipping. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady now. "I need you to climb up on the desk. Get as high as you can." "Why?" "Because heat rises," I lied. "Just do it." She scrambled onto the desk. I uncapped the drain cleaner. I looked at the basement door. I could hear them on the other side, sniffing at the crack at the bottom. The wood was actually getting warm to the touch. They were pressing against it in a mass. I needed to buy us time. I ran to the thermostat. I grabbed the dial and ripped the cover off. I exposed the wires, red and white. I twisted them together. Spark. Deep in the basement, the igniter clicked. Whoosh. The furnace roared back to life. The impact on the door stopped instantly. I heard the scramble below. They were turning back. They were rushing back to the boiler, drawn by the sudden reignition of the fire. The swarm was retreating to the heat source. I slumped against the wall. We had maybe 10 minutes before the room got too hot again, or they realized the boiler wasn't enough. "We have to leave," I said. Sarah looked at the window. "We can't. The snow." "Not out there," I said. I looked at the ceiling. Up there. The way station had a drop ceiling. Acoustic tiles. Above that, a plenum space. And above that, the roof access. "If we go on the roof," I said, "we're cold. We're exposed. But they can't reach us. And we can see." "See what?" she asked. "See if anyone else is alive." I dragged the heavy metal desk to the center of the room, right under the access hatch in the ceiling. It made a scraping noise that made my teeth hurt, but the furnace was roaring now, drowning it out. "Climb up," I told Sarah. She stood on the desk. She was small, light. I handed her the crowbar. "Push the tile up. Hard." She jammed the bar into the ceiling. The tile popped up and slid aside, revealing a dark, dusty square. A blast of freezing air came down. The roof vent was open somewhere. "Can you pull yourself up?" She grabbed the metal framing. She grunted, kicking her legs. She was tough. You don't survive a week in a blizzard without being tough. She hauled herself into the crawl space. "Okay," she whispered, her face appearing in the hole. "Come on." I climbed onto the desk. I'm a big guy. 6'2", 240 pounds. The drop ceiling grid wasn't made for me. I reached up, gripping the trusses. I pulled. My shoulder screamed, the old rotator cuff injury from years of wrestling the plow wheel flaring up. I got my elbows in. I kicked off the desk. Crack. The desk chair I had used as a step kicked out. It skittered across the floor and hit the wall. Down in the basement, the furnace hummed, masking the sound. I hoped. I dragged my hips through the opening. I was in the crawl space. It was tight, maybe 3 feet of clearance. The roof deck was plywood above me. Insulation fiberglass below. It was freezing up here. "Where's the hatch?" I asked. "Over there," Sarah pointed. A metal ladder bolted to the wall led to a square hatch. I crawled toward it. The fiberglass insulation crunched under my knees. Then, from below, I heard the furnace cut out again. The wires I'd twisted, they must have shorted. Or the limit switch tripped. The roar died. Silence returned. And in the silence, I heard the basement door downstairs, the one I had left unguarded, burst open. Crash. The sound of wood shattering. Then, the stampede. They flooded the room below us. I could hear their feet slapping the linoleum. They were screaming, that high, chattering shriek. They found the room empty. "Go!" I hissed at Sarah. "Open the hatch." She scrambled up the ladder. She pushed on the handle. It's stuck. It's frozen. I heard the desk below us slide. They were knocking things over. They were smelling the air. Sniff. Sniff. Then, a fist punched through the ceiling tile right next to my knee. A grey, bloody hand grabbed the metal grid. It ripped the tile down. A face appeared in the hole. It was looking straight up at me. A woman. Her hair was gone, pulled out in clumps. Her mouth was a black ruin. She saw me. She saw my heat. She shrieked. It was so loud my ears rang. She started to climb. She grabbed the truss. She was pulling herself up into the ceiling. "Move, Sarah!" I roared. I rolled onto my back and kicked the hand. My boot connected with her fingers. I heard bones snap, but she didn't let go. She pulled harder, dragging her torso through the hole. She was coming into the crawl space with us. Sarah slammed her shoulder against the hatch lever. Clang. Ice shattered. The handle turned. She pushed the hatch open. Bright, blinding white light flooded in. The storm. "I'm out," she yelled. "Climb." I scrambled backward, crab walking away from the hole in the tiles. The infected woman was halfway through. She reached for my boot. Her fingernails, sharp jagged bone, scraped the leather. I had the crowbar still. I swung it in the tight space. It hit her in the temple. A wet crunch. She went limp, sliding back down through the hole, taking the ceiling grid with her. But more were coming. I could see them piling up on the desk below, a pyramid of bodies, climbing over each other to get to the heat in the ceiling. I turned and scrambled up the ladder. The wind grabbed me as I breached the roof. It tried to tear me off the ladder. I rolled onto the flat, gravel roof of the way station. Sarah was huddled by the chimney, sheltering from the gale. I slammed the hatch shut. I spun the locking wheel. Thud, thud, thud. They were hammering on the hatch from below. They were right under us. I collapsed on the gravel, gasping. The air was -20. It burned my lungs. But we were out. I looked around. From the roof, I could see the road. I could see the Iron Maiden buried in the drift down the highway. And I could see something else. About a mile to the south, through the swirling snow, there was a light. Not a street lamp. Not a car. It was a flare. A red distress flare, hanging in the sky, drifting slowly down. "Look," I pointed, my hand shaking. Sarah squinted. "Who is it?" "I don't know," I said. "But flares mean fire, and fire means heat." I unclipped the radio from my belt. I turned the volume knob. Static. "This is Unit 1," I yelled into the wind, pressing the mic to my frozen lips. "This is Unit 1. I see your flare. Who is this?" Silence. Just the static and the pounding on the hatch beneath us. Then a voice cut through. Weak. Broken. "Unit 1. This is Depot. We are surrounded. Boiler failed. We are freezing." It was the main depot, the massive garage where all the plows were stored. My home base. "Depot, this is Elias. How many survivors?" "Unknown. They broke the perimeter. We are in the mechanics bay. We have the big generator, but we're running out of fuel." The big generator. The backup diesel cat generator. That thing was the size of a locomotive. If that was running, It was the biggest heat source in 50 miles. It was a dinner bell. "Sarah," I said, standing up. The wind whipped my jacket. "We have to move." "Where?" "The depot. It's 5 miles through the woods." "5 miles?" She looked at me like I was crazy. "We'll freeze." "No," I said, looking at the hatch where the monsters were still pounding. "We won't freeze. Because we're not walking." I looked over the edge of the roof. Parked behind the way station, buried under 3 feet of snow, was a vehicle I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a car. It was a snowmobile. A DNR patrol sled. "Do you know how to ride?" I asked. She shook her head. "You're gonna learn," I said. "Fast." There is a specific kind of cold that comes with altitude. Even just 12 feet up on a roof, the wind strips away everything. My jacket, which had held onto a ghost of my body heat inside the station, was now just a piece of frozen nylon flapping against my ribs. I dragged Sarah to the edge of the roof. The snowdrift on the leeward side of the building was deep, maybe 6 feet of powder banking up against the cinder blocks. "We have to jump," I yelled over the wind. She looked down. It was a white void. "If we stay here, the hatch gives," I said. "If the hatch gives, they pull us apart." As if to punctuate my sentence, the locking wheel on the hatch spun a quarter turn. The metal groaned. They weren't just hitting it anymore. They were turning it. They were learning the mechanism. I didn't give her time to think. I grabbed her by the back of her parka. "Tuck your knees. Roll when you hit." I threw her. She disappeared into the white swirl. I didn't hear her land. The snow swallowed the sound. I swung my legs over the icy parapet. I looked back at the hatch one last time. A gap had opened. I saw grey fingers curling around the rim, pulling. I pushed off. The fall was short. I hit the drift hard. The snow wasn't soft. At this temperature, powder packs down like styrofoam. I sank to my waist, the impact jarring my teeth. I scrambled up, spitting snow, scanning for Sarah. A small crater in the drift 10 feet away shifted. She popped up, gasping, shaking snow out of her hood. "The sled!" I shouted. I waded toward the shape I'd seen from the roof. It was a hump in the snow, indistinguishable from a bush or a rock, except for a sliver of reflective orange tape sticking out of the drift. I fell to my knees and started digging. My gloves were useless, frozen stiff, so I used them like shovels. I tore at the snow. Beneath the white, I hit hard plastic. A cowling. I swept the snow away. It was a Polaris Indy. Older model. 2-stroke. A DNR patrol sled. "Is the key in it?" Sarah asked, her voice high with panic. I swept the dashboard clear. The ignition switch was empty. My stomach dropped. "No key." "Check the glove box." I ordered. "Check under the seat." I ripped the seat latch open. Nothing but a spare drive belt and a spark plug wrench. I checked the dash. Nothing. Thud. I looked up. On the roof, the hatch had flown open. A figure crawled out. It was the woman from the ceiling, the one with the crushed fingers. She stood on the roof edge, silhouetted against the grey sky, sniffing the air. She looked down. She saw us. She saw the heat of our exertion. She screamed, a sound that cut through the wind like a knife. Then she jumped. She didn't hesitate. She launched herself off the roof, limbs flailing, aiming straight for us. She landed in the drift 5 yards away. The snow cushioned her fall, but she was up instantly, scrambling on all fours like a spider, snow flying behind her. "Get on the sled!" I roared at Sarah. I jumped onto the running boards of the Polaris. I didn't have a key, but I knew these machines. I knew government equipment. They were all keyed alike, or the ignitions were so worn you could turn them with a screwdriver. I jammed the flat end of my crowbar into the ignition slot. I hammered it in with the palm of my hand. I twisted. Crunch. The cylinder broke. The lights on the dash flickered on. Dim, yellow, weak. The battery was almost dead. "Hold on!" I yelled. I grabbed the pull-start handle. A snowmobile engine at 20 below zero is a block of ice. The oil is like molasses. The pistons are seized in the cylinders. I pulled. The rope came out 6 inches and stopped. Frozen solid. The infected woman was 10 feet away. I could hear her teeth chattering. Clack, clack, clack. She lunged, wading through the deep snow, her broken hands reaching for the back of the sled. "Elias!" Sarah screamed. She kicked at the woman's face. The boot connected, knocking the infected back for a second. I stood up on the running board, putting my whole body weight into the pull. I braced my boot against the console. "Come on, you piece of junk!" I yanked. The engine turned over once. Chug. It didn't catch. The woman recovered. She grabbed the rear bumper of the sled. She was trying to climb up. I could feel her weight dragging the machine down. I saw more shapes appearing on the roof. 3 more. They were lining up to jump. I grabbed the primer bulb on the dash. I pumped it. Once. Twice. 3 times. Flooding the carburetors with fuel. I grabbed the handle again. I didn't just pull. I threw myself backward. Ryop. The engine coughed. A puff of blue smoke shot out of the exhaust. Put. It was dying. It was too cold. I slammed my hand on the throttle, feathering it. "Don't you die on me. Drink it." The woman had crawled onto the seat behind Sarah. She grabbed Sarah's hood. Sarah shrieked, flailing, trying to unzip the coat to escape the grip. The engine caught. Brayerap. The 2-stroke engine screamed to life, a high-pitched, angry hornet sound that echoed off the way station walls. The sudden vibration shook the sled. The heat from the exhaust pipe flared instantly. The infected woman released Sarah. She grabbed the exhaust pipe. She hugged it. Her skin sizzled against the hot metal, but she didn't let go. She was trying to absorb the heat. I slammed the sled into gear. I pinned the throttle to the handlebar. The track underneath us spun. The metal studs bit into the ice beneath the snow. The sled shot forward. The acceleration whipped my head back. The infected woman, clinging to the rear, was torn loose. She tumbled off the back, rolling in the snow. We hit the drift. The sled went airborne for a split second, punching through the powder, and landed on the unplowed surface of County Road 550. I didn't look back. I just hunched over the handlebars and drove. Driving a snowmobile on a groomed trail is fun. Driving one on a highway buried under 3 feet of fresh powder, in a blizzard, is a wrestling match with death. The handlebars fought me every inch of the way. The skis floated on the snow, drifting left, drifting right. I had to lean my entire body weight into the turns just to keep us going straight. "Hold on to my waist," I shouted to Sarah. "Don't let go." I felt her small arms clamp around me. She was shaking, burying her face in my back. The speedometer read 40 miles per hour, then 50. The wind chill at this speed was roughly 60 below zero. It found every gap in my armor. It felt like needles being driven into my neck. My eyes, unprotected since I'd lost my goggles in the scuffle, were freezing shut. I had to drive with them mere slits, tears freezing on my lashes instantly. But we were moving. We were leaving the way station behind. Then I checked the mirror. The vibration of the two-stroke engine is loud. It's a beacon. But the heat. The exhaust trail we were leaving was like a smoke signal for thermal predators. Behind us, emerging from the tree line, they were running. Not just the ones from the station. The woods were emptying. They were fast. On the deep snow, they didn't sink like we did. They ran on top of the crust, on all fours, bounding like deer. And they were cutting the corners. As the road wound through the forest, they were sprinting in straight lines through the trees to intercept us. I saw a shape blur to my left. A man, naked, blue-skinned, sprinting parallel to the sled. He was matching our speed. He looked at me. His eyes were glowing red in the gloom. He wasn't panting. He was purely focused. He angled toward the road. He was going to try to jump us. I gritted my teeth. I waited. He launched himself from the ditch, aiming for the skis. I yanked the handlebars hard right. The sled banked. The ski lifted off the ground. The man missed the hood by inches. He hit the side of the cowling, his shoulder slamming into the plastic. Thud. The sled wobbled, threatening to tip. I threw my weight left, correcting it. The track spun, spraying a rooster tail of snow into his face. He tumbled away, lost in the white wash. Faster! Sarah screamed. I can't see. I yelled back. It was true. The snow was coming down so hard the headlight was just illuminating a wall of white. I was driving by memory and terror. We passed the mile marker. Mile 4. Ahead, the road was blocked. A jackknifed semi-truck lay across both lanes. It was a massive dark shape looming in the snow. The trailer was cracked open, and pouring out of the back of the trailer were people. No, not people. A cluster. A hive. They had been sheltering inside the cargo hold. Now, hearing the engine, they were spilling out onto the road. 50 of them. Maybe more. They formed a wall of flesh between us and the depot. I couldn't stop. If I slowed down, the runners behind us would catch up. If I stopped, the swarm ahead would bury us. I looked at the ditch. It was deep, filled with brush and hidden rocks. Suicide. I looked at the truck. The trailer was high, but the cab was crushed down into the snow. The hood of the semi formed a ramp. A steep, jagged ramp of metal and ice. Lean back. I screamed. Sarah, lean back. I aimed the Polaris at the hood of the semi. I pinned the throttle. The engine shrieked. 60 miles per hour. The infected in front of the truck reached out. I felt hands grab my boot. I felt a fingernail tear through my pant leg. Then we hit the ramp. Gravity is a suggestion when you have enough momentum. The sled hit the crushed grill of the semi-truck. The suspension bottomed out, a bone-jarring clank, and then we were airborne. For a second, everything was silent. The engine revved freely in the air. We soared over the trailer, over the heads of the swarm, over the wreckage. I looked down. I saw a sea of upturned faces. Red eyes tracking the heat of the muffler flying over them. Mouths open, chattering. We slammed down on the other side. The landing was messy. The back end of the sled washed out. We drifted sideways, sliding dangerously close to the tree line. I fought the handlebars, countersteering, wrestling the 500-pound machine back into a straight line. We gripped. We shot forward. We were through. But the noise. The landing had been loud. The crash echoed through the valley. I checked the mirror again. The swarm wasn't giving up. They were climbing over the truck, flowing over it like water. They were still coming. "Are you okay?" I yelled. "I'm cold," Sarah cried. Her voice was weak. "Elias, I'm so cold." I reached back with one hand, feeling her grip. It was loosening. The wind was sucking the life out of her. She was a child. She didn't have the thermal mass I did. "Hang on, kid. 2 miles. Just 2 miles." The road straightened out. We were getting close to the industrial park where the county depot was located. I saw the sky ahead. It was glowing. Not the grey of the storm. A pulsing, orange glow. Flares. More of them. Someone was firing flares continuously. And under the flares, a strobe light. The rhythmic flash of blue and amber emergency beacons. "Look!" I shouted. We made it. We crested the final hill. The depot lay in the valley below. It was a massive compound, fenced in. Large maintenance garages, salt domes, fuel islands. And in the center of the yard, the main garage doors were open. Inside, bright halogen lights poured out. It looked like a cathedral of light in the darkness. But as we got closer, my heart sank. The fence line. The 10-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire that surrounded the yard. It was black. Not black paint. It was covered in them. Thousands. They were piled against the fence, layer upon layer, climbing over each other, pressing against the mesh until the steel bowed inward. The entire perimeter was a seething wall of infected. They were drawn to the massive diesel generators humming inside the compound. The heat signature of the depot must be visible from space. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a siege. "How do we get in?" Sarah whispered. I slowed the sled. We were 300 yards out, hidden by the tree line on the ridge. The noise of the generator down there masked the sound of our engine. I scanned the perimeter. The main gate was crushed. A mountain of bodies blocked it. The side gates were swarmed. There was no way in on the ground. Then I saw it. The salt conveyor. The depot had a massive salt dome, a mountain of road salt stored under a roof. To get the salt in, there was a long, elevated conveyor belt that ran from the loading dock outside the fence, up into the top of the dome inside the fence. The conveyor was 50 feet in the air. The infected couldn't climb the sheer steel stanchions. "The salt belt," I said. "We can't drive up that," Sarah said. "No," I said, killing the engine. "We have to walk up it." The silence returned as the engine died. The cold rushed back in. "Come on," I said, pulling her off the sled. She stumbled, her legs numb. I caught her. I picked her up. She weighed nothing. "Elias," she mumbled into my neck. "I'm sleepy." "No sleeping," I slapped her cheek. "Hard. Wake up. We have to climb." We trudged through the snow toward the base of the conveyor. It was outside the main swarm, near the rail spur. We reached the bottom of the belt. It was a rubber ramp, 3 feet wide, rising steeply into the dark opening of the salt dome roof. I put Sarah down. "Climb. Stay low. Don't look down." We started up. The rubber was slick with ice. The wind up here was ferocious, swaying the steel structure. We were halfway up, 20 feet in the air, when the generator inside the depot backfired. Boom! The sound was like a cannon. Below us, the sea of infected turned. Thousands of heads snapped toward the noise. And then, thousands of heads snapped toward us. Because we were silhouetted against the flares. Two little heat signatures clinging to a steel thread in the sky. A roar went up from the crowd. A sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a famine spotting a feast. They rushed the base of the conveyor. They hit the steel pillars. Clang, clang, clang. The whole structure shook. "Run!" I yelled, pushing Sarah up the ramp. We scrambled on hands and knees. The belt was shaking violently now. They were climbing the pillars. They were forming a pyramid of bodies at the base to reach the ramp. We reached the top. The opening into the salt dome. It was dark inside. A mountain of white salt loomed below us in the shadows. I grabbed Sarah's hand. "Jump!" We leaped into the darkness of the dome just as a hand grabbed the edge of the conveyor belt behind us. We tumbled down the pile of road salt, sliding in the grit, and landed on the concrete floor of the depot interior. We were inside. But we weren't alone. If you've never been inside a road salt dome, it's like being inside a cathedral built for a dead religion. It's huge, conical, and pitch black. The salt absorbs sound. You scream in there, and the voice just dies 3 feet from your face. I lay on my back in the pile, coughing. The dust tasted like brine and old chemical preservatives. It coated my throat, stinging the raw tissue. "Sarah!" I rasped. A small shifting sound to my left. Crunch. I reached out in the dark. My hand brushed her parka. It was stiff with ice. She wasn't moving. "Sarah, wake up." I pulled her upright. She was a dead weight. I fumbled for her neck, stripping off my frozen glove with my teeth to find a pulse. It was there. But it was slow. Thready. She was in the metabolic basement. "We're inside," I whispered, shaking her. "We made it. You have to walk." Then a beam of light cut through the darkness. It originated from the catwalk above us, blindingly bright white LED. It swept across the salt pile, kicking up dust motes, before landing square on my face. The sound of a pump-action shotgun racking echoed in the dome. "CHK, CHK. Don't move." A voice screamed from the catwalk. It was high, cracking with terror. "Show me your skin. Show me your eyes." I squinted into the light, shielding Sarah with my body. "Russo, is that you?" The light wavered. "Who is that?" "It's Elias," I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Unit 1. I got a kid here. She's freezing to death. Put the damn gun down." Silence for a beat. Then the light dipped. "Elias." The voice dropped an octave. "We thought you were dead. We thought everyone outside was dead." "Not yet," I grunted, hauling Sarah to her feet. "But she will be in 5 minutes. Open the access door, Russo. We're coming down." I can't," Russo stammered. Sully gave the order. Lockdown. No one in, no one out. Contamination protocols. I felt a flash of rage, so hot it almost warmed me up. I let go of Sarah for a second and took a step toward the catwalk, sliding on the salt. "Russo, listen to me. I just drove a sled through a literal army of those things to get here. I climbed a 50-foot conveyor belt with a 10-year-old girl on my back. If you don't open that door, I'm going to climb up there, take that Remington from you, and beat you to death with it. Do you understand me?" The silence stretched. I could hear Russo breathing fast. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." "Come to the south wall." I grabbed Sarah again. We slid down the salt pile, boots sinking into the crystals. We stumbled toward the far wall of the dome. A heavy steel door, the fire door connecting the dome to the main garage, creaked open. Yellow light spilled out, and with it a wave of warmth. It smelled of diesel, grease, and coffee. It smelled like heaven. Russo stood there, wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit and a flak jacket that looked like it belonged to the SWAT team. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were wide, darting around the dark dome behind us as if shadows were about to grab him. "Get in," he hissed. "Hurry." We stumbled across the threshold. Russo slammed the steel door shut and spun the locking wheel. Clang. We were in the transition hallway. I collapsed against the concrete wall, sliding down to the floor, pulling Sarah into my lap. "Help me with her," I barked. "She's got severe hypo." Russo dropped the shotgun on its sling and knelt. He touched her cheek and recoiled. "Jesus, she's like ice." "Get her coat off," I said, my fingers fumbling with her zipper. "We need skin-to-skin or warm blankets. Do you have the trauma kits?" "Yeah, in the break room," Russo said. He was staring at my face. "Elias, your nose." I touched my face. I couldn't feel it. My nose felt like a piece of wood. "Frostbite." "It's black, man," Russo said quietly. "Tip of it is black." "Doesn't matter," I said, stripping Sarah's wet outer layers off. Underneath, she was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, both soaked from the snow. "Get me a blanket. Now." We moved her to the main mechanics bay. The depot garage is huge. It's a cavernous space designed to hold 20-ton trucks. The ceiling is 30 feet high, crisscrossed with yellow cranes and exhaust hoses. Usually, it's loud with air wrenches and engines. Tonight it was quiet, but not silent. The background noise was a deep, thrumming vibration that you felt in your teeth. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The massive cat generator in the corner. It was the heartbeat of the building. But the scene on the floor. It looked like a refugee camp. There were maybe 20 people. Mechanics in greasy coveralls. A few office staff clutching coffee mugs. 3 state troopers sitting on a tool chest, looking shell-shocked. And a handful of civilians. People they must have pulled off the road before the gates closed. They were huddled under the halogen work lights in the center of the bay. They had set up cots. Some were sleeping. Others were just staring at the floor. When Russo and I walked in carrying Sarah, everyone looked up. The look in their eyes wasn't hope. It was fear. They were looking at us to see if we were bitten. If we were turning. "Medic!" I shouted. "I need a medic." One of the troopers stood up. He looked young, maybe 25. He hurried over. "I'm an EMT," he said. He checked Sarah's pupils. "Get her to the heater. Over there." He pointed to a large industrial space heater, a salamander, blowing hot air near the tool bench. We laid her on a cot in front of the blower. Not too close. You don't warm them up too fast or it causes shock, but close enough to stop the shivering. I stood back, watching the EMT work. He was cutting her wet clothes off, wrapping her in silver mylar blankets, packing heat packs around her groin and armpits. My adrenaline was fading, and as it faded, the pain arrived. They call it the screaming barfies in the climbing world. It's what happens when blood returns to frozen extremities. It feels like someone is pouring boiling water into your veins while smashing your fingers with a hammer. I fell to my knees, gasping, clutching my hands. I dry heaved onto the concrete floor. "Easy, Elias," a voice rumbled above me. I looked up. Standing there was Sully, the depot supervisor. Sully was a bear of a man. Bald head, grey beard, forearms like tree trunks. He was holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. He looked steady, but I saw the tremor in his hand. "Here," he said, offering the cup. I took it with 2 hands, unable to grip it with my fingers. I drank. It was black, bitter, and hot. It burned all the way down. "We saw the sled jump the truck," Sully said. "Craziest thing I ever saw. Didn't think you'd make the landing. Didn't have a choice," I wheezed. "How many?" "Inside." Sully looked around. 22. Plus you 2. 24 souls. And outside. Sully grimaced. He walked over to the bay door. It was a massive roll-up steel door. He had welded steel plates over the windows. He put his hand on the metal. "Listen." I listened. Beyond the hum of the generator, I heard it. It sounded like rain. A steady, heavy rain. But it wasn't rain. It was hands. Thousands of hands, slapping and scratching against the metal siding of the building. They were feeling for the heat. They were looking for a way in. "Estimates are in the thousands," Sully said quietly. "They emptied the city. They followed the highway north. And now they're all here. Because we're the only light on in the dark." "Turn it off," I said. "The generator. Kill the lights. Go cold. It's the only way they lose interest." Sully shook his head. He pointed to the corner of the garage, where a makeshift triage area was set up. I hadn't noticed it before. 3 people were lying on cots, hooked up to IVs. Machines were beeping softly. "We got injured," Sully said. "Badly. And we got civilians who aren't dressed for this. If I kill the heat, it's -20 in here in 2 hours. The injured die first. Then the rest of us freeze. So we just wait?" I asked. "Wait until they break the doors down?" "We were waiting for the National Guard," Sully said. "That's why I fired the flares. Signal the choppers." "There are no choppers, Sully," I said. "Miller told me before he died. The Guard is gone. The grid is down. We're it." Sully looked at his coffee cup. He crushed it in his hand. "Then we have a bigger problem," he said. "What?" "Fuel," Sully said. "The main tank is outside. We're running on the day tank for the generator. It holds 500 gallons. How much is left?" Sully looked at the gauge on the wall. "Enough for 4 hours." 4 hours. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5 a.m. That meant by 9 a.m. the lights would go out. The heat would die. And the Iron Maiden scenario would replay itself, but this time with 24 people in a metal warehouse. "We have to get to the external tank," I said. "We tried," Russo piped up from behind me. He was cleaning his shotgun, his hands shaking. "Sent 2 guys out the side door an hour ago, to try and run a hose to the pump. And they didn't make it 10 feet, Russo said. They grabbed them, pulled them right into the crowd. Didn't even scream. Just disappeared under the bodies." I walked over to the schematic of the building pinned to the corkboard. I stared at it, my brain trying to work through the fog of exhaustion. "We can't go out," I said, "and we can't let the power die." I looked at the layout. The main fuel island was 50 yards from the building. Too far. But there was something else. "What about the tanker?" I asked. Sully frowned. Which one? The delivery truck. The refueling tanker. It comes every Tuesday evening, right? Before the storm hit. Sully's eyes widened slightly. Yeah. It arrived at 4:30. Driver parked it in Bay 4 to keep the diesel from gelling up. Bay 4. I looked at the row of garage doors. Bay 1, Bay 2, Bay 3. Bay 4 was at the far end of the building. It was the wash bay. Is the truck still there? I asked. Yeah, Sully said. It's sitting there. Full load. 5,000 gallons. There you go, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. We siphon from the truck to the generator day tank. We have weeks of fuel. We don't need to go outside. Sully didn't smile. He exchanged a look with Russo. What? I asked. What's the catch? Bay 4 isn't part of the main heating loop, Sully said slowly. The furnace broke in there last week. We isolated it to save heat. So it's cold, I said. So what? We put on coats. No, Elias, Sully said. It's not just cold. When the infected swarmed the perimeter, they pushed in the roll-up door on Bay 4. Just the bottom panel. They bent it in. My blood ran cold. Is there a breach? We welded the internal access door shut, Russo said. The door between here and Bay 4. We sealed it. But we can hear them in there. They're inside Bay 4. They're crawling all over the tanker. I stared at the heavy steel door at the end of the garage. It was painted red. Wash Bay was stenciled on it. Beads of condensation were frozen on the metal frame. So, here was the math. On one side of that door, we had heat, safety, and a generator that was about to die. On the other side, we had 5,000 gallons of fuel, enough to survive the winter. But standing between us and the fuel was a cold, dark room filled with an unknown number of infected. And if we opened that door to get the fuel, we let them in. How many in there? I asked. Hard to say, Sully said. Maybe 5, maybe 50. They squeeze in through the gap in the garage door. We need that fuel, I said. I know, Sully said. But anyone who goes in there is walking into a meat grinder. It's tight quarters, dark, and freezing. I looked at Sarah. She was sleeping now, her color returning slightly. She looked peaceful. If the power died, she died. I looked at my hands. The feeling was coming back. The pain was dulling to a throb. I'll go, I said. Sully looked at me. You can barely stand, Elias. I know the truck, I said. I know how to operate the pump transfer. And I know how they move in the cold. You guys don't. I turned to Russo. Give me the shotgun. Russo blinked. What? The Remington. And the flashlight. I'm going into Bay 4. Sully put a hand on my shoulder. You can't pump 500 gallons in a bucket brigade, Elias. You have to drag a fire hose from the tanker, through the door, to the generator intake. Right, I said. So I have to go in, connect the hose, open the valve, and start the pump, while you guys hold the door. And while you're doing that, Sully said, what are the things in there doing? They're going to try to eat me, I said flatly. So I suggest you find me some armor. Preparation took 20 minutes. We didn't have time for more. We raided the storeroom. We didn't have Kevlar. We didn't have riot gear. But we had work gear. I put on a heavy Carhartt Arctic jumpsuit. Over that, Sully duct-taped sheets of thick rubber, mud flaps cut into strips, around my forearms and shins. Poor man's bite guards. On my chest, we taped a thick catalogue. Prison armor. I wore a welding helmet. I flipped the dark lens up so I could see through the clear plastic shield. It would protect my face and neck. I checked the shotgun. 5 shells in the tube. 1 in the chamber. 6 shots. I had a crowbar in my belt. A flashlight taped to the barrel of the gun. I felt heavy, clumsy, but I felt insulated. Not just from the cold, but from the teeth. I stood in front of the internal access door to Bay 4. Sully stood at the locking wheel. Russo and the young state trooper stood behind me, rifles raised, ready to cover me. "Okay," Sully said. "Here's the plan. We open the door. You go in. We close the door to the hose width. You have a 2-inch gap. You sprint to the tanker. It's about 30 feet. Connect the hose to the outlet. Open the valve. Signal us. We start the suction from this side." "And getting back?" I asked. "You run like hell," Sully said. "We open the door when you scream." "Inspiring," I muttered. I cycled the action on the shotgun. CHK, CHK. "Everyone ready?" Sully asked. The trooper nodded. Russo was sweating. "Do it," I said. Sully spun the wheel. The latches disengaged with a heavy clunk. He pulled the lever. The hydraulic arm hissed. The heavy steel door slid open. The cold hit us first. A wall of sub-zero air that instantly condensed the moisture in the warm garage into fog. Then the smell of raw sewage and copper blood. I stepped into the fog. I raised the light. Bay 4 was a cavern of shadows. The tanker truck sat in the middle, a massive silver beast, and all over the truck, perched on the tank, hanging from the mirrors, crouching on the tires. They were waiting. My light swept over them. 10, 20. They were frozen, covered in frost. They looked like statues, gargoyles. But as the warmth from the open door washed over them, the statues began to crack. Heads turned. Eyes opened. Red lights in the dark. A low, collective hiss filled the room. "Close it to the gap." I yelled back at Sully. The door slid shut behind me, leaving just a narrow slice of light and the fire hose snaking in at my feet. I was alone with them. "Okay," I whispered inside my welding helmet. "Come and get it." I took a step toward the truck. From the top of the tanker, a figure launched itself into the air, screaming. The figure hit me before I could rack the slide. It was like being tackled by a linebacker made of ice and iron. We went down hard on the slick concrete floor. My helmet slammed against the ground, the plastic shield cracking but holding. I was on my back. The thing was on top of me. It was the driver of the truck, I think. He was wearing a shredded uniform. His face was inches from my visor, snapping. Clack, clack, clack. He was hammering his fists against the catalogue taped to my chest. Thud, thud. I could feel the ribs bruising underneath, but the paper held. I couldn't get the barrel of the shotgun up. It was pinned between us. I let go of the fore-end with my left hand and grabbed his throat. His skin was freezing, slippery with frost. I squeezed. It was like squeezing a stone. He didn't choke. He didn't need air. He just kept snapping at the plastic visor, drool smearing across my field of view. I bucked my hips. I threw him off, rolling to the side. I scrambled to my knees. The floor of Bay 4 was a skating rink. The drains had backed up and frozen weeks ago. The driver lunged again. I brought the stock of the Remington up. Crack! I hit him square in the jaw. His head snapped back, hanging at a wrong angle, but he didn't stop. He didn't feel pain. I pumped the action. Click-clack. I pulled the trigger. Boom. In the confined space of the welding helmet, the gunshot was a physical blow. My ears popped. The flash blinded me, washing out the night vision I'd been trying to build. But the driver was gone. Just a wet smear on the tanker's wheel well. I shook my head, trying to clear the ringing. Through the scratched, fogged-up visor, I saw movement. Everywhere. The gunshot was the dinner bell. From the top of the truck, from under the chassis, from the dark corners of the bay. They were coming. Shadows detaching from shadows. I stood up, gripping the fire hose that trailed behind me through the door gap. "Come on!" I roared inside the helmet. My voice sounded hollow, distant. I moved toward the truck. It was 30 feet away. 2 infected sprinted at me from the left. I swung the light. They were fast, slipping and sliding on the ice, but keeping their balance with inhuman agility. Boom! The lead one dropped, legs blown out from under him. Click-clack. Boom! The second one took the load in the chest. He flew backward, sliding across the ice like a hockey puck. 3 shells left. I reached the side of the tanker. The midship access panel. This was it. I had to drop the gun. I couldn't operate the valves with one hand. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder. I grabbed the hose coupling. It was a heavy brass fitting. I looked at the truck's outlet. It was capped with a dust cover. I grabbed the cover and twisted. Frozen. "No, no, no," I grunted. I torqued it with both hands. The metal bit into my gloves. It wouldn't budge. The condensation had frozen the threads. I felt a weight hit my back. Someone had jumped onto me from the truck catwalk. I went face first into the side of the tank. My helmet smashed against the aluminum fuel vessel. Clang. Claws, sharp, broken finger bones, raked across the back of my neck. They tore at the collar of the Carhartt suit. I felt the rubber mud flap armor shift. I spun around, swinging my elbow. It connected with something solid. I grabbed the crowbar from my belt. I didn't look at what was attacking me. I just swung. The bar hit flesh. The weight fell away. I turned back to the valve. I jammed the tip of the crowbar into the handle of the dust cap. Leverage. I pulled. I screamed with the effort, my boots sliding on the ice. Screech. The metal sheared. The cap broke free. Diesel fuel dribbled out, thick as syrup. I grabbed the hose. I jammed the coupling onto the truck's outlet. I threw the camlock levers down. Snap. Snap. Connected. Now the valve. I grabbed the main butterfly valve handle. I pulled. It opened smoothly. I felt the hose jump as the fuel rushed into it. Go! I screamed into the radio mic clipped inside my collar, hoping the signal punched through the steel wall. Start the pump. Pull. The hose stiffened. The suction from the other side had started. The fuel was moving. I had done it. Now I just had to survive the 30 feet back to the door. I turned around. The path back was gone. Between me and the sliver of light at the door, there were at least 15 of them. They formed a wall. They weren't rushing me all at once. They were hesitant, circling, confused by the strobe light on my shotgun barrel. But they were blocking the exit. And worse, they were looking at the hose. One of them, a small woman in a nightgown, knelt down and bit the fire hose. She was testing it. She could feel the vibration of the fluid moving inside. If they punctured that hose, the vacuum would break. The fuel would stop. "Hey!" I yelled. "Over here! Look at the heat!" I racked the shotgun. Click-clack. I raised it and fired into the ceiling. Boom! The noise scattered them. They flinched, covering their ears. I lowered my head like a bull and charged. I ran straight into the pack. I used the shotgun like a battering ram. I slammed the muzzle into the chest of the first one. He folded. I kept moving. My boots found traction on the grit I'd tracked in. Hands grabbed me. They grabbed the rubber flaps on my arms. They grabbed the welding helmet. I felt myself being lifted. There were too many of them. They were swarming me like ants on a beetle. I couldn't shoot. They were too close. I felt teeth clamp onto my forearm. They gnawed on the tire rubber. I felt the pressure, crushing the muscle, but the skin didn't break. "Get off!" I dropped the gun. It clattered to the ice. It was useless now. I grabbed the crowbar with both hands. I started swinging in a tight arc whack. 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 I hit heads. I hit shoulders. I hit knees. I was a whirlwind of steel and rubber. I broke through the first line. I was 10 feet from the door. "Sully!" I screamed. "Open up!" Through the gap, I saw eyes. Russo's eyes. Wide with terror. He hesitated. He saw the swarm behind me. If he opened the door wide enough for me, they would pour in. "Don't you dare close it!" I yelled, reading his mind. I lunged for the gap. An infected hand grabbed my ankle. I fell forward. My chest hit the concrete. My helmet slammed into the steel doorframe. I was pinned. Halfway in, halfway out. I kicked backward blindly. My heel connected with a face. Then, strong hands grabbed my harness. "Sully!" He hauled me backward. I slid across the threshold, scraping my armor on the metal. "Clear!" Sully yelled. "Close it!" I gasped. The hydraulic arm engaged. The heavy steel door began to slide shut, but an infected arm shot through the gap. Then a head. It was trying to squeeze through before the seal closed. It was gnashing its teeth, eyes locked on the warmth of the garage. Sully didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fire axe from the wall. Thwack. He brought the blunt end down on the intruder's shoulder. It shrieked and recoiled. The door slammed home. Clang. Sully spun the locking wheel. We stood there for a second, listening. On the other side, the pounding started immediately, fists raining against the steel. But inside there was another sound, a steady, rhythmic glug-glug-glug coming from the transfer pump. I rolled onto my back, ripping the welding helmet off. I gasped for air. The air in the garage tasted sweet. Russo was staring at the clear plastic sight glass on the generator fuel line. "It's flowing," he whispered. "Clean diesel. We have flow." I lay there for a long time. The adrenaline crash was brutal. My arms throbbed where the rubber had been chewed. My neck was bleeding from the scratches. But I was warm. I looked over at the cots. The heaters were still humming. The lights overhead were steady. Sarah was sleeping, color back in her cheeks. We had bought time. Maybe a week. Maybe 2. Sully sat down on a crate next to me. He looked tired. "You did good, Elias," he said. "We're still trapped," I muttered, wiping blood from my neck. "We're just trapped with a full tank." "Maybe not," Sully said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. "A printout. While you were playing hero in the wash bay," he said, "the radio picked up a signal. On the emergency band." I sat up, wincing. "A voice. A loop," Sully said. "Automated. It's coming from the Mackinac Bridge Authority." The bridge. The 5-mile suspension bridge connecting the Upper Peninsula to the Lower Peninsula. The only way south. "What does it say?" Sully handed me the paper. I squinted at the scribbled handwriting. "Attention all stations. Mackinac Bridge is secure. Navy vessels anchored in straits. Refugee processing center established on Mackinac Island. Icebreakers clearing channel. Proceed to Stignace Terminal. Repeat. Bridge is secure." I stared at the words. "Navy?" I asked. "In the winter?" "The Great Lakes Fleet," Sully said. "If they're there, if they have the island secure, that's not just a shelter. That's a fortress. Water on all sides. No way for the infected to cross the ice if the breakers keep the channel open. St. Ignace is 100 miles east," I said. "Through the worst of the storm. On roads that haven't been plowed in 3 days." "I know," Sully said. He looked at the Iron Maiden, my plow truck, parked in the corner of the garage, thawing out, dripping meltwater onto the concrete. Then he looked at the massive rotary snowblower, the Oshkosh H-series, parked next to it, a beast of a machine designed to eat snowbanks and spit them 100 feet away. "We have the fuel now," Sully said. "We have the plows. We have the mechanics to armor them up." I looked at Sarah sleeping. Then I looked at the door, where thousands of monsters were waiting to tear us apart. "We can't stay here," I said. "Eventually, they'll find a way in. Or the food runs out." "So?" Sully asked. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. "So," I said, "we build a convoy. We turn these trucks into tanks. And we plow a road to the bridge." Sully smiled. It was a grim smile, but it was real. "I'll get the welders," he said. That was the night the plan changed. We stopped being survivors. We became travelers. It took us 3 days to prep the trucks. We welded steel grates over the windows. We mounted plows on everything that had an engine. We raided the salt supply to make sandbags. When we opened the main doors that morning, the sun was shining. It was 20 below zero. The yard was a sea of frozen bodies. I took the lead in the Iron Maiden. Sully drove the blower. We rolled out into the white, engines roaring, blades down, carving a path through the dead world. But that is a story for the next tape. If you're listening to this, keep your engine running. Keep your heat close. And if you see a plow convoy heading east on Route 2, don't get in the way. This is Elias Thorne, Unit 1, signing off.